Hello and welcome, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you to Alta Live. Unfortunately, we have no artisan meats and cheeses. I've just been hearing a hilarious story from Tod Goldberg about appetizers and refreshments at events. Hopefully you've brought your own. A great thing about Alta Live, the digital interview series we do here at Alta Journal, is that you get to BYOB. You get to bring your own snacks to this. So I hope you've done so. Welcome to Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta's digital editor, and we are in the midst of Alta Live's Writers on Writers series. Normally, Alta Live is a interview series where myself or another editor or a contributor from Alta will interview an author, a subject of the magazine. But this month, in honor of our writers issue, we've selected pairs of writers to be in conversation with each other. So today we have two real bold names, Tod Goldberg and David L. Ulin. They both have new books out that they're gonna discuss today. We're gonna talk about noir. We're gonna talk about mystery. Todd's new book, Gangsters Don't Die, released by Counterpoint. David's brand new book, The 13 Question Method, released by Outpost 19. Both are available for sale, and we will send you links to both of those. We've asked David and Tod here today to kind of join in conversation with each other. They know each other well. This is going to be an easy breezy, presumably hilarious conversation.
Now the pressure's on.
They are both, while very irreverent, they are also both brilliant authors, and I'm excited to hear what they have to say. Before I let them talk, though, I want to tell you about Alta. If you have never heard of us, David L. Ulin is our books editor, number one. Tod Goldberg contributes to the magazine. We are an award-winning quarterly journal focused on California and the West. We do weekly events like this. We host a California book club. In fact, tomorrow evening, John Freeman will be in conversation with Jenny Egan for her new book, for her book, The Candy House. This issue, we also feature a holiday guide. It features 126 books by our contributors. Your holiday shopping is done. All you need to do is go through our guide, buy David's book, buy Todd's book. There's a million different books, poetry, art, design, nonfiction, whatever you want, it's in there. Check it out. If you like what we do here today, visit us at altaonline.com. Check out more of our work. You can join us as a member for $50 a month. You get a hat, you get a book, you get the magazine, or just $3 a month, and you can be a digital member. So please do consider. There is a button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions for Tod and David. I will pop back in about a half an hour and ask questions on your behalf. There is also a chat section. Be cool in the chat and let us know where you're zooming in from today. I see South City, Marin County, Tracy, California. Welcome, everyone. Shout out to everyone that got the earthquake alert earlier this morning. Also, up here in NorCal, we're having an earthquake alert. It was a mini. Anyway, with that, I am
an alert to let you know what you know is already happening.
I got a whole family thread going about this. But yes, those of us in the Bay Area and into the Delta got an earthquake alert today, a shake alert, letting us know that a 4.1 happened out in the Delta, which for Californians, it's a truck drive.
Like having gas. 4.1 is like, oh, my stomach's upset.
Anyway, gentlemen, congrats on your new books. I turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Hey, Tod.
Hey, David Ulin. Hey, everybody out there. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, here's something special, you guys. This is fascinating for all of you. Not only are you seeing the two of us, I am coming to you live from not even my home, but from a home of an even more legendary writer. I am sitting in the house of the legend Susan Straight right now, because I like to do my interviews at various legendary writers' homes.
Well, and she's kind of working the noir territory lately too, and and so let's thanks to Alta for doing this. Thanks to all of you for being here. Todd and I kind of doing this dog and pony show a bit, so we'll just sort of pick up where we left off the last time we were having this conversation.
I think that's good.
Do you want to start or should I start?
I will start because I think the audience has big questions for you. So here's the most important thing, David. You've just written your first noir novel. Now that you have spent 2 years or so in the head of a really terrible person doing really terrible things, do you understand me better?
Oh yes, absolutely. You're the model, for the character.
So what was it like putting yourself in that mind space? I'm sure readers, a lot of them know you, of course, for your nonfiction or for your criticism, but I've read your fiction before. What was it like, though, just full time getting into the mind space of someone who's really dark and troubled for a book like 13 Question Method?
Well, it was a stretch, but I
You pulled through.
I muddled through. I mean, to be honest, I think one of the most interesting things about it is, as someone who writes largely autobiographical nonfiction, the novel's written in first person, so but it was really interesting and kind of exhilarating to write first person from the point of view of someone who wasn't me.
Right.
In fact, when my wife first read the pages, she was like, I was like, "What do you think?" She's like, "It's great to read you not writing about yourself." So yeah, we've always had this running joke when I'll say to her, "I don't know what I'm going to write about this. I don't know what I'm going to write about this," and then I'll be like, "I figured it out." And she'll be like, "What?" And I'll be like, "It's not, I'm not writing about, about Tod Goldberg. I'm writing about what Tod Goldberg means to me." So that was kind of removed. That kind of I don't know what we want to call that self-focus, let's say,
right.
was moved off. But I really did. I mean, I think there was something really, like in nonfiction, as because you write nonfiction also, you have to live the story before you write it.
Right.
Fiction, you create it as you're working. And so there was that shift was really kind of exciting for me, because I didn't know what was going to happen. I generally don't know how an essay or a nonfiction book is going to unfold until I'm writing it either.
Right.
But I do know what the lived experience was. And in this case, it was just the freedom of the challenge of figuring it out, but also the freedom of being able to not be bound by stuff that had actually happened was really, really powerful.
But the interesting thing for you, and this is something that I've been doing for the last 4 books I've written too, is that you are writing a book that is running parallel to some real events happening in Los Angeles at the same time. And I think what that does, particularly for noir fiction, is I think by having your story run parallel to reality, it actually adds a fundamental level of believability, even when things might be unbelievable, because you think like, oh yeah, like you never know what's going on in someone else's house. Someone could be in Susan Straight's house right now doing an interview. You'd never know. Exactly. And that's what I love about your book, is that there's stuff that's recognizable about Los Angeles happening inside of it, and you're sort of tying yourself or your character to those events.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I wanted to have it grounded in a recognizable contemporary Los Angeles. I started it before the pandemic and then put it down for a while because again, the plotting question, I literally wrote my character into a room I couldn't figure out how to get him out of. And it took me 5 years to figure that out. It only took me 8 months to write the whole book around that 5-year gap, but it was, the 5-year gap. So, but I wanted things like, the Hollywood car fire guy, the guy who set all those cars on fire in Hollywood 10 or 15 years ago, like he comes into the book and there's a connection there. There are other connections. One of the key plot points of the book involves a wildfire that basically threatens the West Side. And so, if you've lived here long enough, or even for a couple of years, you've had some essence of that experience. Right. It's interesting you bring this up, because the same, I think, is true of the whole Gangsterland trilogy. We've talked before about the idea of setting it, because it's set in Vegas, and involves a hitman who is gone undercover, I guess we can say, as a rabbi, which is just a construct that we're going to need to spend some time talking about. But but because of that, you said that the challenge is, how does this person hide out in a city where there's tons of surveillance and all that, and especially now. So you set the books in the kind of right around 9/11, just before and after, right, in late 90s, early aughts, because you don't, because of the technology, well, I guess the technological limitations of that era. So I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about the way that the reality of Vegas in that moment became necessary for you to use in terms of creating the novels.
Yeah, it was really important. So interestingly enough, and this has happened a few times in my career, these books actually start out as a short story. And this is maybe the fourth time I've written a book that started as a short story, actually. And in the short story, it's the last day of this guy's job as a pretend rabbi, and it concludes in 2017 or something like that, which is when I was writing, or I'm sorry, 2009, which is when I was writing the story. And then when I went to go write the novel, the first novel, and I began to write that 2 years later in 2011, and I had the notion of someone hiding in Las Vegas after having had plastic surgery. Plastic surgery won't stop facial recognition software from identifying you because they use the eyes, and you can't, no matter how much plastic surgery you get, no matter how much you end up looking like a cat, you can't change your actual eyeballs. And so facial recognition can just use your eyes. And so I had to reimagine everything that I'd written in the short story and place it in an earlier time period, in order to make it plausible that a person could get away with escaping to a big city, hiding out, and still being surveilled at, a certain level. And so over the course of the books, the first book starts in 1998. The last book, the one that's out now, begins in 2002. And by 2002, post 9/11, post Patriot Act, essentially, Las Vegas's surveillance it became the most surveilled city in America because the terrorists from 9/11 had come there. And so they were really focusing on the information that the FBI could glean from following them around strip clubs and casinos and all that stuff in Vegas. And I was like, well, if my character is wanted by the government, they would do that same level of thing for him eventually. And so I knew, like, okay, I need to end this book in 2002 because you really can't hide anymore. It's almost impossible. Like I live outside Palm Springs in a city called Indio, and just a couple nights ago there was a murder that happened on a street, just an indiscriminate street where a guy shot another guy, and they're like, no suspect has been identified. They had that person caught 24 hours later because every single house on the block has a ring that is pointed to the street and identified the guy's car.
Well, isn't that what happened with I'm terrible with names, but the journalist in Las Vegas who got killed by the city councilman or whatever?
Jeff German,
they had video of his car. Yeah.
So and that's another thing. So terribly sad story. A journalist named Jeff German, who was investigating a local politician for corruption in Vegas, got murdered by the politician, and they found him in like 36 hours because they tracked him just walking down the street with a knife in his hand or whatever. This is the interesting thing I think about writing crime fiction now is, as much as we don't want to have to deal with technology, as much as we think bad people are going to do bad things irrespective of the changes in technology, it's the getting away with it that is more challenging. But that's why I write about bad people doing bad things to other bad people, because bad people don't call the cops when something bad happens. Right. And it's the same sort of situation, I think, in your book right now, is like your main character on the first page is approached with with a task that only happens in noir novels. I'm going to give you $200. Go investigate something for me. That maybe you'd hire a private investigator to do if you actually weren't doing something nefarious.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you had, I'm really interested in kind of, and this is one of the things I love about noir too, is I'm really interested in kind of people's fantasies of who they are and who they actually turn out to be, because I think that divide, as that divide gets wider and wider, you're deep into the territory of noir. And so my book is very, it's essentially a 3-character play, right? And and every single one of those 3 characters, I should make it sound like that's a whole cast of an epic cast, but every single one of those 3 characters, all three of them, they all have something to hide or something to protect, right? So they're not going anywhere. Basically they're trying to suss each other out to find out what the other one knows and to find out what certain things that they aren't sure of whether they've happened, so that they can move forward in trying to screw each other. You know, at the center of the book is an inheritance dispute between a stepmother and a stepdaughter over a multi-million-dollar estate, and neither one of them wants the other to have a piece of it. The narrator, the character, gets in between the two of them because I'm not sure why. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't know about him, which I can talk about, but I think was kind of intentional. I wanted him to be a little unreliable to me, so he could be unreliable in other ways. Right. But he's looking for something. He gets in the middle of this thing inadvertently, and then it snowballs. And I think that too, if you're kind of drifting around and you can easily end up in a situation that, where all of a sudden, without realizing it, you're way deeper than you thought,
Well, and the great thing about your book, and I've written a lot of these kinds of characters in my life too, is that you're writing an unreliable narrator. It's my belief, though, that every first-person narrator is an unreliable narrator, including in life.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to let you people know I'm an unreliable narrator right now. I put a little filter on because I was feeling a little puffy. So this isn't even how I look.
And I shaved. So yeah.
I'm not going to go that far for these people. But I love using an unreliable narrator in a crime novel. Because everything that they do is predicated from the outset on a lie. Committing crimes is about committing lies. And so why would you ever expect the narrator of a crime novel to be honest with you? And so when I think about books like, and this book must have been a bit of an influence, like The Talented Mr. Ripley, right? Where you never know what's real in a book like that. That's so much fun. But for you, like, how hard was it to build at least a foundation under your character so that there is a control? Do you get what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, so I didn't the progress of the book involves a number of things, but one of them is the narrator's descent into what I've been calling madness, because I think about it in that 19th century, bedlam kind of way. And so two things have to happen there. And again, I figured this out. I agree with you. Like, I think every narrator is unreliable, whether they're, I think, governments, obviously, states, religion, like every narrative is unreliable because every narrative comes with an agenda. And that means it's in the service of something. So
right, exactly.
And I'm just interested in that in general. And yes, it gets heightened when you get into this territory. So what I really wanted to do was make that descent into madness believable. So two things have to happen. One is he can't start raving. You can't be raving at the beginning of the book. He's got to seem quasi-reasonable, right? He gets approached by the the screaming person across the courtyard, and he has to clean up after her, and he has to kind of be the responsible one. And then things start to slip as he gets enmeshed. So he had to start off at a baseline. He had to seem somewhat reasonable or somewhat responsible, and then it has to be a gradual descent, and it has to have an internal logic. Like his unreliability, and I'm sure this is true. I feel like this is true with Rabbi David Cohen, right?
Yeah, for sure.
His unreliability is that he doesn't think he's unreliable, right? He's right. It all makes sense to him. It's divorced from what the reality outside of his head is.
Right. Well, isn't that the fun thing, though? Like, what I love to do in my own books is have someone ask a character who's an unreliable character a question, have them answer honestly.
Yeah.
So there's a point in Gangsters Don't Die where the main character, Rabbi David Cohen / Sal Cupertine, that's his real name, he has not seen his wife and child in 4 years. They're in witness protection. And in this book, the wife and child sort of escape witness protection through a series of terrible things. And they're staying in an Airbnb in Arizona, and this woman who runs the Airbnb asks the wife, like, what's your problem? Like, how can I help you? And the wife just says, well, my husband is a hitman for the Chicago Mafia. He disappeared 4 years ago. Someone murdered an FBI agent, I don't know who, and we've been on the run for the last 48 hours. And the woman just laughs and says, can you imagine if your life was like that?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes in that book for that very reason, because all of a sudden there's a part of you, because you as the reader know, you've been reading all along.
Right.
My first reaction was like, I can't believe you're really telling her. And then of course she wouldn't believe it.
Of course, right. Because people believe what they want to believe, and they hear what they want to hear. And I think when writing crime fiction specifically, and noir as in a broader sense, that sort of commitment to suddenly being willfully truthful, people have a really hard time with that. It's like when you ask someone how their day is, like, oh, how you doing? And they're like, well, I got a bunion, there's blood in my stool, I've got a sty in my eye, my wife's not speaking to me, my dog eats its own shit. You're like, I just want to get my food at Trader Joe's and go.
Right. I'm like, do you really want to know? Because I can tell you, it's going to take a long time. There's a lot of stuff to go through.
There was one time, this is a very quick story, I promise. There was one time my sister and I were having lunch with her husband at this deli that I go to in the desert. And her husband was going through some shit that day. And the woman walks up and says, oh, how you doing? Nice to see you. Oh, how are you? She says to my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law was like, I don't know if I've ever had a true friend. And I was like, what? It's like, it just occurred to me, I don't know if I've ever had a true friend. I think people have always used me for something. And my sister's like, stop talking and order food.
But that's the moment. I mean, there's also something really interesting about that moment too, that I think is, I mean, it's true in all writing, but really true in noir, where, when the character has that realization, when the facade drops for the character, and all of a sudden they're seeing them, they're looking in the mirror and they're going like, oh shit. Right. That's that's a powerful dramatic moment. You can do all kinds of things from that. Right. They make certain decisions. In the case of my character, a certain unwise decision. Right. But he's ready. He's like, I'm taking charge now. I'm like, oh no, don't take charge. But he's gonna do it,
Well, you said so last night, folks, David and I did an event on this very same topic. And David said something so wise that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, which is that
I've already forgotten it.
Oh, I'm going to let you know, and then we're going to get it tattooed on our knuckles. You said in noir fiction, characters make their own bad luck. And it was like, oh, it was like, whoa, angels spoke to me when you said that. And like, that could be the thesis statement for your book. Like, my characters make their own bad luck, because every single choice, and really this is true in both of our books, I think, every single choice our characters make at the outset is the wrong one.
Yes.
Like, both of our characters at any given time could have just said, I'm not doing this. Like, this is not what I want to be. But they always just sort of go all in to see what happens. And it's that desire just to be like, well, I'm going to play out the string, see what happens. Right. That's the essence of, sort of great crime fiction. Like, you make your own bad luck, and then you have to try to figure your way out of it. And what I love about your book, and what I love about sort of the genre in general, is it doesn't require a happy ending. It just requires
I think it kind of requires the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Or at least a conditional ending, if not an outright unhappy ending, right? Because that's one of the things that appeals to me about the genre, is that it pushes back against that idea of the happy resolution, or we all walk away at the end and things are settled, because that's just not how it works. It's not how life works. There is no happy. I mean, unless you're well, sorry, Beth, but unless your version of a happy ending is to spend eternity in a box, there's no happy ending.
See, this is the problem with Jews talking about happy endings. We don't get it.
It doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to us. I've just got the all caps David in the comments thread. But I want to go back to this idea, because it's true. Like, something I say all the time, because I come from a family of meddlers, is like, leave well enough alone. I'm not talking about the family I made. I'm talking about the family that made me, right? But, I'm like, I'm always like, leave well enough alone. Just leave well enough alone. And in the case of, in case of my character, in the case of, I don't know about, Sal or Billy Coopertine, like, I don't know that there's an opportunity to leave well enough alone, but they certainly did things that provoked, trouble for themselves.
Right.
But in the case of my character, if he just stayed if he just said, like, no, I'm not going up the hill, none of this happens.
Right.
I don't mean to make this comparison, although I will, and I really don't want to sidetrack down this territory, but I will for a brief moment. If Donald Trump had not run for president, he'd be sitting pretty right now. There'd be no problem. There'd be no indictments.
I think about that all the time.
Like, it's like, leave well enough alone. What's wrong with you?
Well, this is the problem with narcissists, is they want power. I think about that all the time. It's like, well, if you didn't want to have 92 indictments, maybe you don't run for president and commit a bunch of crimes.
Right. Exactly. If you know you're going to commit crimes, keep in the shadow.
Don't be president.
You're protected, right? You got like let Weisselberg be your fall guy. You're good. You're good. Don't but like but the narcissists or whatever, yes, there's something really really interesting. And I do think, I do make a couple of riffs. My character, just as a joke, I make jokes for myself. When he gets dressed up and decides he's going to play detective and he goes up the hill, he puts on a blue suit and an oversized red tie. There is something about, just stay in your lane, right?
Right. But I love the idea of people changing identities and getting power from it. And it's even sometimes just about putting on a uniform, right? Like you put on a suit and suddenly you're a different guy. It's like how Superman and Clark Kent, like, I can't tell the difference. I can. They're the same guy. What's wrong with these people that they can't see that? He just took his glasses off.
And he let the curl. He lets the curl down.
He let the curl, right?
Yeah.
But I love this notion that there's this idea that we can become different people simply by changing some tiny aspect of ourselves, and then we become unrecognizable to those other people. And it's, where your family is meddlers, right? My family is like,
none of them are watching this.
And so I always find myself writing characters that are far more aggressive in reality than I would ever be. And maybe in some way, like, that's the wish fulfillment of crime fiction. From like a lot of times I'll watch true crime at night if I'm feeling kind of frazzled or whatever, because I'll watch one of those forensic shows and everything will be out of order. Someone will have killed 18 people and they look for him for 30 years and no one's ever going to find him. But I know at the end of this show, they're actually going to find him. And that idea that chaos can be controlled again and that someone can put a stop to things, I find that very cathartic. And that's why I like to write crime, but it's also why I like to read it. There's a catharsis that I go through that I don't get in literary fiction. I don't want things just to run off into ellipses where people think about their moms. I want there to be a hardened cop who's never going to stop looking for the killer.
Right. And I think also for me, I was interested in this book. It's a bit different with Gangsterland because so much of it has to do with backstory because of the fact that he takes on another identity. I was really interested in this book in writing about a character who had tried to willfully forget his own past to the point where it doesn't really matter. We get no real reference to his upbringing. There's a very oblique reference at one point to his parents no longer being around. But basically, I was like, okay, at a certain point, it doesn't matter what how you were raised or what your childhood was like, because you're responsible for your own decisions now. It doesn't matter how or why your marriage fell apart or what part played in that or any of those things. It's the only thing that matters is here you are. So there was something really interesting for me because in my nonfiction, I'm always making those connections or thinking or conjecturing. And there was something really interesting about like that fine straight line of just this person in the present disintegrating, right?
And for me, like that, the great difference, of course, between writing nonfiction and fiction is I can't blame anything on my mom in a novel that I'm writing.
Well, you could have a character, you could base a character on your mom.
Oh, David, how dare you think I haven't based every character on my mom?
I know I do. Believe me, I know. Having read almost all of your books, I do know where they are.
Think my mom doesn't show up in every character.
But that's also, again, I will say, although that's not the case in this book exactly, in fact, at all, because none of these characters are based on anybody. But there is that deniability, where you can say to somebody like, "Oh, that character's not based on you," just because they look exactly like you and talk like you. It's a composite. It's a fictional composite. Don't be such a narcissist.
The one nice thing about the Gangsterland books is no one asked me like what part of this is about your real life. Like my book Living Dead Girl, where a guy murders his wife and child. Oh yeah, that's based on my life. Yeah, that's real.
Right. I see Beth. Beth. I see Beth is back.
Hi, Beth.
Back from the grave.
Beth, did you hear us calling?
Yeah, I did. First of all, David, it's so fun to get to hear you talk about your own work. So often at Alta, I see you interviewing other people about their work. It is nice to see the Ulin glow of talking about your own work. It is very cool.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have the opportunity.
Some questions for you. One comes from Michael Kiesling that I kind of want to tie together with a broader question. He says, Tod, did you consider any other locations or professions for your gangster rabbi character? The premise for the Gangsterland books is brilliant. And kind of the second part of that I wanted to ask was why both of you think Southern California makes such a particularly good noir setting.
Sure. So no, I always knew that it was going to take place in Las Vegas. So the Gangsterland books take place in Chicago, Las Vegas, and Palm Springs. And I wanted those locations because I didn't want to deal with the New York mafia, which we know really well, and which is also the mafia of The Godfather. I wanted to deal with the lesser known crime families like the Chicago ones, but the Chicago ones always ran Las Vegas. The Chicago crime families were some of the ones that started the casinos in Vegas themselves. So I always knew I wanted to write about Las Vegas and Chicago. The notion to start writing about Palm Springs actually came in later because for a very clear reason, which is I bought a house about half a mile away from a very large Indian casino that I became obsessed with. Because the Indian casino is also right near this neighborhood where the Mexican mafia headquarters are. And I was like, I'm wondering about what's happening here. Did they choose this area because the Mexican mafia is right down here? And so I became obsessed and was doing research on that. But also, Palm Springs and Las Vegas are resort towns. And I love the idea of the people that come to resorts and try to be someone else, which is everyone on vacation. We try to be someone else. But particularly in Vegas, people go to Vegas just to act like an asshole and to act like gangsters and to dress like gangsters. And that idea that then someone who's an actual gangster comes to Las Vegas and then dresses up as a good person was really compelling to me. And I wanted to flip that notion of Vegas on its head when I was writing this.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I mean, for me, I think, Southern California is it's related in a certain sense, because the other thing about a resort or a place like Las Vegas is it's aspirational. You go there to have fun, but you're also going there like you want to hit the jackpot. You want to make the big score. You want to get outside of your life for a little bit and misbehave in ways that would be unacceptable back home, right? And I think Southern California is different. The premise of the place is a little bit different, and it's changing. But the classic idea of Southern California as an aspirational landscape where you come to make it, or come to be your true self, or put your past behind, or show all those people in high school who you really were. The reality is most people come here and that doesn't happen. I mean, if that's why you come here, then you're most likely going to be sorely disappointed. And Mike Davis called it, and we were talking about this last night, Steph Chaw brought this up. Mike Davis called it the sunshine noir dialectic, right? Where if you come, the sunshine is what draws you, all the promise of the sunshine, the Edenic nature of the place. And when you don't get that and you're stuck here and you can't go home because you're not going to go home and reveal to all your friends that you're the loser they thought you were, you're stuck. And that's a bad place to be. And I think it's a perfect kind of recipe for what noir, or for how, it's perfect territory from which noir can operate.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that we said last night too. So if you were there last night, I'm sorry to repeat it. It's like if you come to a place to get your dreams, the majority of people don't. And so what happens when you don't get your dreams? Like there's real desperation that's involved with that. And desperation, desperation leads to crime.
Yeah.
That's kind of a downer.
Yeah. Sometimes it also just leads to art, but not usually.
What brings us here? Evan asks, I'm always interested in hearing a writer's view on how noir is distinct from other subgenres of crime fiction. I guess, how do you define noir? What makes it noir?
Well, I think it's, bad people doing bad things to worse people. Is an easy way to look at it. There's the general notion of the darkness of things, the lack of a happy ending. And noir gets thrown around. Noir has lost its original meaning from French noir, obviously, because when you talk about like sun-bleached noir, well, that's sort of like California noir, where the brightness is the overwhelming darkness.
Right.
You know, in David's book, he describes the sun as being like a sledgehammer. And like that's noir as fuck to describe the sun as a sledgehammer. And it's a different kind of darkness when everyone can see what you're doing and you do it anyway. That's noir as fuck, and you're doing it under the brightest sun possible. And so I think that's different than just a cop solving a crime. It's, you know, it's the willful flouting of social constructs. That's what I would say if I were a professor, which I am.
Which you are.
Right. But then I'll just add that, you know, for me, the noir I love, I mean, granted, noir can be detective stories. A lot of classic and great noirs, detective stories, Chandler Hammett, Walter Mosley, you know, Chester Himes, you know, the Harlem novels. But the noir that I'm really drawn to is the story of the perpetrators, not the cops, right? Like, so, you know, like Double Indemnity, like James M. Cain's Double Indemnity, like the books of Jim Thompson, like In a Lonely Place, or Ripley as an example, right? I'm interested in the malfeasance, the doers of malfeasance, rather than the ones who catch them out. And that is a whole other kind of interior cycle, right? Because again, you've got people who are telling themselves stories or presenting fantasies about, or acting out fantasies of who they are that have nothing to do with who they are. They're aspirational in their way. They're trying to make a score or something,
right?
But they're also kind of inherently unaware of who they are. And so again, it goes back to that idea of the bad choices that they make. And I also think that noir is the genre, the crime fiction genre, that doesn't offer a lot of false hope or resolution at the end of it. You know, in a detective novel, Michael Connelly once said to me when I was in an interview, you know, the thing about a detective novel is that it ends, the case is solved, and for a moment anyway, the universe is righted, right? Like you know, wins out over evil and everything's okay, right? The next day, the cycle starts again, but you have a little brief bit of respite. For me, like this, the kind of perpetrator-driven noir that I'm interested mostly in reading and writing, there is no respite, there is no let up. It's just there's nothing.
And I like to write a character, because I write series often, I like to write a noir character who actually has scars and who actually has trauma and whose choices are reflective of the trauma that he or she has gone through previously, but that they still make shitty choices. You know, I'm not interested in heroes. I'm interested in wild cards. You know, because heroes have a margin, bad guys don't. And I want to write about people who will step over everything to get the thing that they want. My sister, who's a lawyer, once said to me, "Tod, I love you, and I want you to know I would never, ever get between you and something that you wanted." And I was like, "Oh, thank you, Karen." And she said, "Unless I wanted it to."
But that's a really good point. You know, I mean, I'll just, as another professor, let me detour for 1 second. Like I often say to students in writing class, you know, what's at the heart of a scene is a character wants something and there's another character who doesn't want them to get it. This is a broad generalization, but it's not only those two desires, it's what they're willing to do, right? It's not only that you want something, but what are you willing to do to get it?
Yeah.
And what am I willing to do to prevent you from getting it? And the more you get that into the action, the more amped up that scene becomes. And I think that is absolutely at the center of kind of how noir works.
Yeah, absolutely. We should write noir novels. Oh, we do. That's right.
I want to dive in with one last question. I know you've got to go teach young minds. This current issue is the writer's issue. In fact, there is a huge feature on David L. Ulin in here of just being a writing genius and nonstop gifted, talented author that he is. Can you tell us each a little bit about kind of like your writing? Look at this, David L. Ulin.
Great drawing.
The best image ever made of me.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Can you tell us just what in terms of writing books, novels? You both have written a ton of books, but it's specific to novels. What's your process like? Do you have a space? Do you have every morning at 4 a.m. I get up and I, do whatever?
The only thing that I'm doing at 4 a.m. when I wake up is peeing. Just
hope you're taking notes about that, Evan.
Yeah, everyone, Evan, get that down. When I'm writing a book, my process is pretty much the same, which is I drink a bunch of coffee, I insult people on the internet from about 10 until 11, and then I write from about 11 until 5, 5 days a week. But I start by rewriting every day. So every day I sit down and I rewrite the previous day's work. So I go back and I look at the 4 or 5 pages I wrote, and I go and I edit and rewrite, and then I start again, and I end each day when I still feel fresh. If I'm feeling like I'm going to write to exhaustion, I don't do it, because then I don't know what I'm coming back to in the morning. So I like to stop when I'm feeling hot and can't wait to get back to it. And that's really served me well, like for the last 12 years, that sort of process of saying, all right, stop when you know what you're doing. And I'm not a big outliner. I know the beginning, middle, and end of a book, but I really don't know anything else. But as long as I know what I'm writing toward at the midpoint and what I'm writing toward at the end, that's the fun part. Like that's why I have this job, is I get to go, kill people and blow shit up in between.
Yeah, I'd say something similar. I mean, I always start the same way. I start every day reading. I usually read the last couple days pages and mess around with them. It's a way of I always think of it as like, walking into the ocean. Like I get into my knees when I'm doing that, and then it's like I'll get adjusted to the water temperature, and then I'm in. I've got the language. It really depends. I also don't outline. I often don't know, like I said, in the case of this book, the first idea was guy gets caught between 2 people in an inheritance dispute and chooses wrong. That was all I had to start. And it took a long time to kind of figure it out. I write in sort of stages it's a weird process, but in every single one of my books, whether fiction or nonfiction, I've written a number of pages, hit a wall, put it down for a period of time. Sometimes that period of time is like a couple months, sometimes it's more, and then come back to it and seen kind of the thing that was eluding me, and then finish the book really fast. So in the instance of 13 Question Method, I wrote the first 75 pages in the summer of 2015. As I said, got my character into a room I couldn't get him out of. A bunch of other things happened in my life and writing and whatever. And then during the pandemic, early in the lockdown, I went back. I wanted to read the pages again. I'd always liked them. I reread the pages, and in the process of reading those pages, I was like, oh, I know exactly what has to happen here. It was something, without spoiling it, it was a radical turn that I didn't have the guts to make. And then when I reread the pages, I was like, there's only one thing that can happen here. This is what needs to happen. And that unlocked the whole back end of the book. So it's a process of presence and intuition, I think, if that makes sense. And then once it's rolling, it's just every day. And I'm the asshole walking around, like taking notes on my phone. I'm taking a walk. I'm like, oh, I'm like, talking to myself and typing on my phone. And then I come home and I, download all the stuff I put on my phone and, put it, and I start working.
Gentlemen, Tod Goldberg, David L. Ulin, thank you so much. The books are Gangsters Don't Die and 13 Question Method. I sound like Larry King at the end of the interview. The book.
The book.
13 Question Method. Folks, thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alta.
Here. Join us next week, not on Wednesday. We're doing a special episode Thursday with C. Pam Zhang and Lydia Kiesling to talk about, they both have hotly anticipated second novels coming out. We're going to talk about that. Join David and me tomorrow evening. Jenny Egan will be in conversation with John Freeman about her book, The Candy House. And we are wishing all of you a happy and safe fall. Thanks for watching Alta Live with us. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everybody.